Hello and welcome everybody to the self-improvement segment. This is Aurélien. I'm here with Logan, and today we're going to be discussing LOI, letters of intent. So since you're a broker, Logan, it's your bread and butter. You do that all the time. Can you please tell us more about them and if you have any tips and secrets?
Yeah, absolutely. So the LOI, the letter of intent, people can get these mixed up between a letter of intent and a purchase and sale agreement, right? So the purchase and sale agreement is the legally binding, full-fledged offer. That is, here's your offer, here's what I'm offering, everybody signs it. And once that's signed, you're under contract, right? A letter of intent is still signed. It's still two parties agreeing on everything. But oftentimes in the commercial real estate world, when you go to the purchase and sale agreement, sometimes attorneys start to get involved, right? People want their attorneys to review the purchase and sale agreement. They want their attorneys to write the purchase and sale agreement. The buyers will. So the letter of intent is a nice, clean, and easy way for either broker to broker to help their clients, or even seller to owner, seller and buyer directly to communicate and put their terms out there in layman's terms so that everybody can agree on those things prior to moving towards a purchase and sale agreement. So it's kind of like the precursor to a purchase and sale agreement. So we're going to get into one, and I'm just going to share one with you so you can see what it looks like. But essentially, it's a non-binding contract. Typically, the only binding portion of it is if you have a timeline in place for producing the purchase and sale agreement, or if you have, because sometimes what will happen is you'll put that out there and say, hey, we've agreed on all these terms. We're going to sign this letter of intent that says X, Y, and Z. And sometime within the next 10 days, we're going to write up the purchase and sale agreement and sign it. And during those 10 days, don't negotiate with anybody else but us. And that's typically about the only part of it that's binding. But the whole purpose of it is just to make sure that before you get to that point where you're bringing attorneys in and you're starting to spend money and you're starting to go towards that official status of under contract, you make sure you're all in agreement on what you're thinking in advance. So that's kind of the gist of it before we jump into it. But I'm just going to show you one, a letter of intent. I'm going to pull this up right here real quick.
And I find it's a good way to save time, because people kind of agree in advance before getting into contract. And I like to send along a little letter, introducing myself. That way, the seller has a bit of context, so they know who they're talking to and where it's coming from, explaining the terms in the LOI.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let me do this. Let me share this real quick. All right. Are you seeing this
Yep.
Word document? Is that showing up right here?
Perfect.
Good. Okay. I've got some things blacked out here because I had, actual writing on this one, but this is pretty much it. So this is essentially, if I'm making an offer on a property, or if I'm helping a client make an offer on a property, this is the first thing I send across. And it typically is going to spell out the seller. This is my LLC right here. As the purchaser, I'm going to have a date. If there are brokers involved, I'm going to spell that out just so everybody's on the same page. Hey, here are the brokers involved. This might be the address. What is it regarding? It's regarding this address. And then I typically have some language in here that says, this is a non-binding letter, represents the purchaser's intent to purchase the above property. This is my intent. Ordinarily, towards the top, I'll put, price, financing, earnest money, and some other things. So I'll throw in the price. This one, for example, was this 1.1 million. I threw this offer out as, I'll give you, or seller financing 1,050,000. I'll give you $50,000 down. And let's see where that goes. That could be any number of things, right? This is the beginning of the negotiation. They may have come back and said, no, we want you to put at least 25% down. We'll do 75% seller financing. Then maybe I would go back in here and say, okay, but this needs to come down. The price needs to come. But this is where you're going to be negotiating these things. So just some general information that's in it. Typically price, you can throw in financing, how much earnest money you plan on putting down. And then due diligence. This is where you spell out, some of the things you want to do in due diligence, how long you might need. This can be as simple as, hey, we want 45 days for due diligence. And that can be all that you write right here. I mean, it doesn't have to be as elaborate as this. Closing, you'll talk about typically the due diligence amount of time and then how much time you need after due diligence to do closing. Additional terms. This is where I throw in anything. If I've already called out seller financing, I typically will write, how I plan on going about that. 30 years, 4.5 interest, balloon after 36 months is what this says right here. I might specifically call out anything particular to the closing. This is where additional terms I might put in, anything else. I want the truck that's on the lot to go along with this. There's a dump truck and I want the dump, whatever that is, spell that out in this section. So you can spell that out and say, here are some additional things aside from, because the seller's waiting to hear what the price is, right? The seller's waiting to get this to hear, how much are you going to give me for my property? They want to know this stuff. And then how long is it going to take to get it? That's what this stuff is. Additional terms are, okay, now that we've talked about that, what other little details do we have to work out? And this is a great place to put that. Property taxes, I just throw this in here to say, you're going to pay your share of it for the year. I'm going to pay my share of it for the year. It's pretty customary. Purchase contract, buyer shall have X amount of days to, upon the mutual acceptance of this letter of intent, to present a purchase and sale agreement. And then it can be as simple as that. This letter of intent is not intended to create a binding agreement. It's for the purposes of moving towards a purchase and sale agreement. Typically we'll sign, have, any parties involved. If there's a listing and a buyer's agent, they would sign. If it's just a seller buyer, they would sign, just so everybody's on the same page. Now, in the brokerage world, ordinarily what would happen is I would get this back, and let's say I sent this for my buyer to the other broker, and they say, no, I want this to be 1.25. You'll typically get it back with a strike through like that, and it'll come back looking, they'll write, sorry, I'm typing the wrong thing. You might get something like this in return, and they'll strike through, and then maybe they'll change colors here, and you'll get it back like that. And that is their counter, essentially. But it's basically a counter back and forth before you get to a purchase and sale agreement. So I've seen some that are significantly more detailed than this. I've seen some that are significantly less detailed than this. In a transaction where, let's say, for example, you have a sale leaseback where you have to worry about this information, but you also have to spell out the details of what that lease might be. That's going to be a lot more complex, and it's going to be a little bit longer of a letter of intent, but still, it's just the main purpose is to spell out, hey, before we go to contract, are we in agreement on all these things? So does that make sense?
I love it. I love the 5% down.
Yeah, right. Try. Why not try, right?
Yeah, as a starting point, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So absolutely. And usually, the market's so crazy right now. This is probably an offer that would very much get rejected. If it was on market offer with another broker on the other side, they'd say, no, don't do that. But you never know. You always got to throw it out there. Negotiation is negotiation. So, yeah, that's kind of the rundown. That's the quick and dirty of it. It's it's a non-binding letter. So I would just make sure if you're writing it, put that type of language in there. This is a non-binding letter, just so they know. We put it at the front and at the back, just so everybody is very aware that this is, that's not meant to be a contract. This is meant to be an agreement upon terms as we're working towards a contract. So that's kind of the rundown and the quick, the quick synopsis of it. As with anything, obviously, if you're worried about contract language, check with your attorney. You've seen that letter of intent there, so don't take that as the gospel truth for what a letter of intent is supposed to be. You can write it yourself on a napkin, and the whole point of it is just for the two parties to agree in advance before you go under a legally binding contract.
Awesome. Well, I think that was very clear, and I'm sure our audience benefited a lot from that. And it's a great example of LOI. Thank you for sharing
Sure.
again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and see you in our next episode.
All right, guys. Take care.